What's up, Eager to Pleasers? Welcome back to another episode of the Eager to Please podcast. I'm so excited about the guest I'm about to introduce, who I came across as I was listening to a conversation she was having with Gemma Hartley, another favorite guest of mine, about the question, is marriage worth it? So maybe this is kind of part two of that conversation. I was so intrigued by her perspective and authentic writing, and quite honestly, about how much our lives resembled each other, that I asked if she'd be a guest on the show. So fortunately for us, she's here. Miss Cindy DiTiberio is here today to share some of her thoughts on relationships, raising kids in two homes, and her two hit newsletters called The Motherload and Divorce Diaries. Thanks for being here, Cindy.
I'm so glad we connected.
Likewise. Yeah, me too. So I'd love to start just by having you share a little bit about yourself and how you kind of got into writing. Was it something that you had always done, or was it just kind of like this was your way of writing through the divorce type thing?
Yeah. So my background, I've always worked in publishing. Okay. I started at an in-house publisher at HarperCollins back when I was 23 as like an editorial assistant.
Nice.
And worked as an editor for 9 years. And then I had kids, and it was, one of those situations where I was commuting up to the city. So that didn't last very long because it was pretty brutal. And so then I transitioned to kind of like freelance work and started actually ghostwriting and collaborating with authors, helping them write their books. And I did that all the way up until May of 2020 because my kids were in kindergarten and third grade when the pandemic hit. And when the book that I was writing, when we sent it to the publisher and my kids were still nowhere close to going back to school and there were no summer camps, I just said, okay, I'm going to hit pause until these kids go back to school. And that was really, unfortunately or fortunately, the impetus for my kind of turning within and doing my own writing and listening to myself for once. And so that's when I started writing about motherhood. I was just interrogating how I had ended up all of a sudden. I was like a stay-at-home mom. And I'd never intended that to be the case. And then I realized that I'd really kind of put my career, which I loved. Listen, I have been a reader and a writer my whole life. The fact that I found my way into publishing, it was a dream job. It was so fun that I got to be a part of like the books that were put out there. I was surrounded by books all day. It's all reading, all writing. It was just like the dream job. And I was able to kind of pivot and still stay in that industry. But, I still only worked part-time once I had kids. But I didn't really work part-time. I only had part-time childcare and I took on full-time work. And so I was trying to build this career, which was like so exciting for me. And it gave me so much life, but fitted around the contours of what my kids needed for me. And I realized as all of a sudden I'd completely given up my career, that maybe I wasn't okay with those choices I'd made even back then, that it was actually kind of rough for me to do that. Yeah. And maybe it wasn't the right choice. And so it became this whole kind of way for me to interrogate the way I'd entered into motherhood and wifedom. And it was really just an awakening. I mean, I think so many of us were confronted with our choices with the pandemic because it was like motherhood on steroids with like no child care, no support. Obviously your spouse was there, but it also brought all of those issues to light because you couldn't escape them by going to work each day. You were just like, it was a pressure cooker for so many things. So the motherload was really born in the pandemic as I started writing about some of my feelings. And so I launched it in November of 2021, and it was mainly about motherhood. And then I started to really interrogate marriage. And I realized some of the confines that I had contributed to motherhood were maybe not about motherhood, but just about like the dynamics of marriage and what I was expected to do versus what he was expected to do. And little did I know that then I would end up facing a divorce. And then the motherload really became about divorce. The motherload has just followed me in my own evolution as a woman, right? And so it talks about motherhood. It's now, the tagline is now a feminist exploration of motherhood, marriage, and divorce. I could maybe add a new tagline and dating, as I'm starting to date, but I'm not quite ready to go there because, that's a whole nother topic.
Yes, right.
But that's probably some of where it's going, right? Because I just write about like the things that I'm learning. And I think a lot of times, when we were just starting to write about the hardness of motherhood in those early days of the pandemic, I really think it brought to light women then finally felt free to say how hard some of it was. And yeah, so that's kind of what I've been doing. And it's been really, really fun to connect with other thinkers and writers around these topics because they're not going away, especially, I think obviously the motherhood discourse is always there, but people are really, really wrestling with what marriage requires of women these days. Mm-hmm. So many young women are not really looking to get married. Obviously, there are a lot of men who still know that they benefit from it and are like, whoa, no, what are these young women doing? With all the concern about the birth rates and all of that, we're at a precipice, I think, where, the current structures, everyone can see they're not working for women. And the question is, are we going to reinvent them? Are we going to just keep doing this and expecting women to shoulder so much? Mm-hmm. Or can we find new ways to orient our lives that aren't so dependent on the sacrifices of women?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I 100% fit in the same category as you. And I don't know if I want to attribute COVID as the demise of my marriage or just the awakening of me, because I did feel like once COVID hit and we were forced to kind of slow down, I don't know. You had made a comment when you were talking with Gemma in your discussion about how in the hell did I get here? Like your head is down, you're raising these kids, you're full force, busy all the time. And raising kids, I don't know, it doesn't matter if you have 1 or 3 or 5, you're busy. And whether you work, whether you don't, like life just keeps on piling on the stuff. And you had made a comment that one day you just look up and you're like, bam, it hit me in the face. Like I didn't realize that there was not any life left in my marriage because I was living Groundhog Day and constantly focused on the kids. And then there was little left for me to pour into our relationship, just because I was doing the brunt of the work. And I don't know how it got to that point. And yes, I signed up for it. Like I wanted to be a mother, I wanted to help raise our kids. I didn't realize at the time, as you had said, if I had made the right choice. And then in hindsight, when COVID hit, I'm like, I don't think that was the right choice for me. I love my kids to pieces, but I felt like I was missing a part of me somewhere in there and wanted that back. And I think the marriage suffered from that because we couldn't get it back. We tried therapy, we tried all the stuff, but it just, when you're not the right people for each other, you're not the right people for each other. So yeah, I get that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think some of what we talked about is, again, the nuclear family is kind of positioned as like the solution to like how we orient our lives. But I think the nuclear family actually destroys marriages. Like it's not actually a sustainable system to have the nuclear family and then this marriage. And, we talk a lot about how, it's just the one little group of 4 people isn't enough, especially if we lived in a different society where our workplaces didn't demand so much of us, maybe it would work. But we live in a time where our workplaces think they own us and there is no time off. We come home from work and we're still expected to be on. And so there's just not, and then we have schools that only go till 2:30. And so who's picking up the kids? And then we also have the overarching pressure that we're supposed to be like making these mini Einsteins who are going to go to Harvard. And so what do I need to do to get them to like have all the extracurriculars so that they're ready to get into the college of their choice? So all of those things contribute to the fact that there's just not enough. Mm-hmm. And then I think the relationships suffer because we don't have enough supports. And so then it's just those 2 people are supposed to keep everything running. It's not enough. And we've seen that. Yeah. And so I think we're just starting to call out that fallacy that like, oh, if you just get married and have kids and you both have jobs that pay the bills, like you'll be fine. And we're seeing that, no, we're not fine. And I think a lot of women are getting divorced because there's not enough energy to pour into that relationship. So then that relationship dies on the vine because there's not enough it's the first thing that can go. You can't not love your kids. You need your job, right? So it's the first thing that goes. And it is really sad. Obviously, I too, like you, think there are a million reasons that ultimately that was not the right relationship for me. And I had a lot of reasons why I, ran right past those red flags, because again, we're conditioned as women to be like, as long as you secure that husband and everything else is going to fall into place.
Yes.
And sadly, that is not true.
Yes,
so many
it is
of us
not.
have learned.
It is not.
So yeah. So then I think, there are so many of us who are now on the other side of our potentially first divorces, although I say I would never get married again. But, we're on this other side and we're like, well, how did I go wrong? What would I tell my younger self if I could? What can we tell these other women so they don't find themselves in the exact same position that we're in right now? Yes. Not that being divorced is bad. Being divorced is great, but the process of divorce is horrible.
Yes.
It extracts so much money from your family system. And it is tough on kids. Like, I'm not going to pretend that my kids love having two houses. They do not, and I don't love that for them. So if there's just a way we can let's just say enough of this blueprint of like marriage equals your future is secure, and think about what else we could put in place so that we're not caught in this like fairy tale that is actually a nightmare.
Exactly. Well, I was just going to touch on that fairy tale and go back kind of to the roots, because obviously marriage has been something that we've done since the beginning of time, and people join families and whatnot. And so I know I've talked about this in previous podcast episodes of my own, but were you one of those little girls that had that fantasy of, finding Prince Charming and growing up and getting married, and, everything's going to be fine and dandy if you find that one? And so I'm curious, were you in that camp, or were you kind of like, we'll just kind of see what happens?
No, I mean, I think I was in that camp. I think one was that, growing up in the 80s, there weren't a lot. I mean, women were just kind of starting to like find their place in the career world. I definitely had no idea what I wanted to do as a career, and that wasn't important to me. I knew I wanted to be a mom. Yep. And then I'm going to say brainwashing, but got kind of like amped up even more because I became an evangelical Christian in high school. And wowza, does that subset of society really want you to get married? Because there are so many things you cannot do until you get married. Wink, wink.
Right.
And so, so that is, and again, it's the celebration of the, and not all religions are like that, and not all Christians are like that, but it really is the celebration of the family unit and having children and submitting to your husband and all of that stuff. So for me, and I was an evangelical Christian until I would probably say I was like 24, 25. And, and I went to college in the South. I went to college in North Carolina, and like people got engaged in college and married right after. Like this was not out of the question. It was like you were like the ultimate success if you graduated with an engagement ring on your finger, because now you've got your degree, but you also know you've got your husband and you're set for life. Right. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a pretty strong message. I also think for me in particular, I lost my dad when I was in college. He died of cancer when I was like before I turned 20. And I think that was very destabilizing. And I think I was anxious to find my next family because the one that I grew up in had gotten kind of like blown up before I was ready for it to. Yeah. So I was looking for that sense of safety too. Like, where do I belong? So let me just hitch my wagon to you, because then it just erases a lot of questions. And I'm like, well, I've got my person and that's all that matters. And I'll go where he goes. And, all of that, you just kind of, that felt safe. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of my story too. It's just a really insidious message that like, that's as long as you find your person, you're good. Yes. Yes. I also think, and I think I say this before, it's so expensive to live in our country too. Some of it I remember was I was tired of living with random roommates too. I couldn't afford to live on my own. I worked in publishing. I lived in San Francisco. That math ain't mathin'. So I also think some of it is like, you're just anxious to like have someone else paying the bills. And, yeah, it can be fun to have roommates in your 20s for a little bit, but then you get tired of it and you're like, I just want to live with someone who I know is my person. So I think that's part of it too, is like, we just don't have the societal structures to make it affordable to live on your own, or to make it feel more organic. Like, you don't have to wait until you're married to feel a sense of family. If we had more communal living and you're like, ooh, these are my people, maybe I'll get married. But either way, I've got this really nice network that's keeping me feeling like tethered and safe and held in a way that right now we only really have that in our romantic relationships. And that's where I think we're missing out. Because, as I talk about, like, now that I'm in my 40s and I'm divorced and I've learned to prioritize my female friendships, like, they hold me in a way that is so lovely and life-giving. And so I could have had that in my 20s if I'd learned to look for that and nurture that.
Agreed.
But I didn't learn that, I learned to look for the man and not the network of women who were probably ready and willing to be that for me too.
Yeah. Well, also too, I feel like it's tough as a woman because there's the cattiness and the jealousy and like the competing, and, to find a good core group of women, I feel like is hard sometimes, just because, I don't know, maybe it starts from within and being confident with yourself so you can elude that to other people. And that's what draws people to you. But, I struggled with that all growing up, because I too lost my father when I was in high school. And so I didn't have that male figure in my life, that I feel like little girls crave. They want their dad, I don't know what it is, but they want their dad. So, I don't know. I felt like I always gravitated towards guys. I had a ton more guy friends than girlfriends. And even to this day, I feel like I have more guy friends than girlfriends, and that's just the nature of it. But I have heard you and Gemma specifically say community, like female community, is so important. Not just if you're going through a divorce, but just because we get each other and we can talk about emotions and we can push through, hard conversations and that kind of thing. So it's just finding your people. That's where, I feel like I'm guarded with that. And I only let certain people in close because I'm like, oh, am I going to get burned? Or are they going to talk about me or whatever? So.
Yeah, it can be hard. And I think I've been really lucky in the last few years. I will say that I didn't prioritize friendships in my 20s. And then once I was married, I didn't have time for friendships.
Exactly. Right.
And so, but I've been really fortunate to sometimes I think the key is just finding one or two and then they have friends. And then I've kind of gotten absorbed into this group of women who are, for the most part, have kids a little bit older than me. But it's been so lovely. So they already had a dynamic and I've kind of swooped in, and I like kind of being the baby, and and it's also so helpful because, I'm 45. And so this year, one of the things I've written about on the motherload is this year I went on hormone replacement therapy. I'm not sure I would have, but I had these older women who are 5 or 6 or 10 years older than me who were like, oh my gosh, I wish I'd not waited. I waited 5 years too long to start that. If you're having these symptoms, go do it now, and that's really valuable to have women who are just a little bit older than you who can provide that kind of feedback, So I think I've gotten lucky, but I've also, I think, really prioritized that as I've left my marriage and, I was not ready to start dating. And so who was going to fill my social calendar? Well, my girlfriends. Right. And they were more than willing to fill that calendar up on the weeks I didn't have my kids. Mm-hmm. And now it's I have too much going on. And so the weeks that I have my kids, I'm like, wait, but I still want to hang out with my friends. And, it's a good problem to have.
It is. Absolutely. Yeah. You talked a little bit before, Cindy, about the blueprint of marriage and how it's this economic situation that's supposed to be a partnership, but in the research that you're seeing and in your own writing pieces, how are you noticing that this blueprint is changing and shifting?
Yeah. Well, again, the blueprint of marriage was created for a different time. First of all, It first came to be as exchange of property. Women were property. They went from husband to father, or from father to husband. That's literally the whole giving away down the aisle situation, which I still think is weird that we do that because it's such a patriarchal symbol, right?
Yes.
And so the origins were about women getting who's going to take care of this being who cannot earn, right? Like women weren't allowed to earn money. And so it was like an exchange of goods, and there were dowries, and, it was combining of land, and it was like dynasties, and it was all these things that were not related to love at all. And then even once love got into the picture, it was still set up that the man went out and worked, and then the female did all the homework, which at that time was actually valued as work because they understood that someone had to do it and it brought value. Mm-hmm. And then, obviously for a lot of reasons, then women wanted, well, actually you can look at the war. When men went away to war and then women came in and to fulfill those roles because they had to have someone there. And then women actually realized that they liked working. They got kicked out when the men came back from war, but the women were like, wait a second, that felt real good. And so then we see this whole transition in our society where women felt like they could go outside of the workplace and earn money. And then from then on out, I just think marriage hasn't actually worked because we're no longer exchanging one good for the other. Yeah. And so that's, I think, what's problematic about it. I also just think the roots of marriage are so patriarchal, so based in Judeo-Christian thinking. You have to work very, very hard to fight against that. I think even just being a husband and a wife, they're such loaded terms. Yeah. And it's actually very hard to fight against the unequalness of those roles, even though we say that we're feminists or that we live in an equal society, we want an equal marriage. It's almost, you had to fight like tooth and nail to fight against what those roles are. And you just end up, unless you're the like 2% of marriages who can really resist that, you just end up in these roles that end up with a lot of resentment for the wife. And then the husband's like, but I'm doing all this. And then it just doesn't work anymore. So I know it's super pessimistic, but I think we need a reframe of what we should be doing with this. And then again, you also then look at like what it takes to get divorced. It's so hard to get divorced without spending a lot of money. Yeah. And so that process is just like grueling. So yeah. I don't know what the answer is, whether we're going to choose to just live with people and set up some sort of contracts that aren't as difficult to extract as the divorce. Whether, we'll stop really prioritizing romantic relationships as the way that we ground and organize families. I mean, I think we're a ways from there, but I think women right now are we're just questioning it, because it's not, it's just not working out well for us.
Absolutely. Well, that was my biggest question is, why do I need a contract to say that I am committed to a person? Because once you sign that and you're legally married, like everything is commingled, finances, houses, cars, debts, all the stuff. Yeah. Debts. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's not just positive. It's also the negative stuff too. So, I'm 100% on board with that. It's yes, eventually I would hope that I would find someone that I can, share my life with and go do fun things with and that kind of thing. But I do not want to go through what I went through 3 years ago. Painful, right. Traumatic, like you said, financially exhausting and all the things associated with it. So I'm with you. I don't know. Maybe it will be just an easier contract or just, the other thing too is like some adults don't know how to act like adults. Like, are you still going to be cheating, as an adult without having a conversation, just saying, hey, this is not working, and then leave the relationship? I mean, come on now. Yeah. That's the other thing too, is like, then we'll have all this crazy behavior. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I go back and forth because I think it's different once if I were 20, would I still want all of that? I mean, I think I would still probably have this idealized, I want to partner with someone and have kids with someone. Because once you put kids into the mix, I understand, right? That you do want to share a household with someone, and that there is then, if you're raising and you're making kids together and you're raising kids together, there should be some commingling, right? Mm-hmm. Because those kids. So yeah, it's just a real question of how do you structure it? I don't think a marriage certificate is required. And I think if I'm later in my life and it's not about kids, I don't think I would ever want to share my assets with someone again, because now I'm 45. These are now mine and you'll have yours. And like, you know, I think it just gets complicated once you've been burned, I guess, by like seeing how hard it is to extract yourself from someone. You just go into it with different eyes. So
for sure.
Yeah, I wish it weren't this way. I wish that marriages were just automatically better than they are, you know, but like, I think I'm not going to say that there aren't happy marriages. And one of the things, because so I do the divorce diaries where I have women share their anonymous stories of divorce. But I also then started this marriage diaries because I think we also keep a lot of the truth of marriage behind closed doors because it feels disloyal. Maybe you tell some of your girlfriends, but like it's definitely not public knowledge. But, you know, so, and again, I have to admit that I have a skewed segment, right? Because the people who are reading the Motherload probably aren't real happy in their marriages anyway. But I had like within 24 hours, I think I had like 30 submissions of the marriage diaries, which was like, whoa, this is a lot to unpack. But there were so many that really did feel trapped, like that was a theme. And then I think I had one, and God bless her, she was like, oh, I didn't realize, was this supposed to be if you're unhappy in your marriage? Because I filled it out, but I actually like being married. And then I shared hers and I called it, This is the Story of a Happy Marriage. And I was like, no, I love that you shared yours, because she really did kind of unpack some of the things that made that marriage such a like unicorn, right? Like amazing that they didn't have money worries. They had an equitable division of labor and it had not been a struggle. It always had kind of been that way. They had similar sex drives. So it was just like they had these 4 things that meant that it worked. And she acknowledged that she was like, yeah, I probably got pretty lucky here.
She's
you know?
Anomaly. Yes, exactly.
It's an anomaly, you know? And again, it's not to say that there aren't happy marriages. I just think that for most people, it doesn't actually work out that way. And maybe you stay married, but you're not happy. You're not sleeping together. Who knows, you know, what's really going on behind the doors. I think there's a lot of unhappiness, even from people from the front look like they're, you know, doing just fine.
That was me for the better part of it until, exactly. Well, I want to go there for a second because I know you have at least one daughter, maybe both of your kids are girls. I'm not sure. And I've got 3 and I have to be really careful because I feel like I'm not a man hater. Like, let's just establish that. Like, you know, at some point I would love to have another relationship, but raising girls in this day and age, as opposed to when we were growing up in the 80s, like it is not about you taking care of your husband anymore. It's about how is he taking care of you too? And not just financially, because there are so many other ways that women want to be taken care of. It's not just, are you bringing home the paycheck? Because guess what? I went to school too, and I can make my own money. It's how are you stepping up to the plate? Are you showing up for the family unit? Are you showing up for me? You know, looking around to see, hey, there might be pink scum over there. Maybe I should clean it instead of waiting for you to clean it. So I have to be really careful about how I approach this with my kids. And I'm wondering if you've approached that subject yet with your kids and what advice you're giving them as they continue to mature and have relationships on their own, because I want my kids to have healthy relationships, which is why I got out of the marriage. It was not a good example of a marriage for them. And I want them to have what I didn't have. I feel like every generation says that with their kids. We want you to be better than us. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Oh my gosh, I am not nailing it. I mean, and I have to be a little careful, and I'm not careful enough. I think that my kids would say that I'm a man hater. And, you know, most men is what I'm going to say. Yes.
Okay.
You know, because in that conversation with Gemma, listen, I was a little brutal to men because I don't think men are socialized to be humans the way women are. So I think that a lot of men are lacking in the capacity to show up in the way we need them to, which is why we're turning to our girlfriends. Right. So that is not an attack on men. It's more an attack on our society that has such different expectations and how we raise boys and what we expect from men. And so we're just in this transition stage where I think actually it's getting better. And these new generations of men are evolved more and know how to have those conversations of emotional maturity, et cetera, et cetera. But not all of them do, especially, and it's funny because I do think some women my age are tending to date younger because they're like, the men our age they just don't know how to human the way the younger ones have learned a little bit, so it's a different experience. You don't want to date a man in their 50s, they're X, Y, or Z. And I'm not being as, I'm open to all ages, I will just say. But but I do think I also want my kids to have healthy relationships, but I'm very much of the school of I just think we should expand what we think of as a successful life anyway.
Yeah.
And some people end up with a solid partnership and some people don't. And that doesn't mean their life is any less successful. I'm very careful to not presume that my children will have children because you know what? First of all, it's not guaranteed. No one knows. Our bodies sometimes don't cooperate. It's expensive to do IVF and adoption. So guess what? Maybe children aren't in your future, and that will not, I will celebrate you just the same, right, whether you are birthing children or birthing companies or birthing art or whatever you choose to do. So I probably go a little extreme. I really do like for my kids to not buy into this is what a successful life looks like. If you have good love and good sex and all those things, well, maybe that's success for you, but maybe it's not, So, but I think, so I wouldn't say I'm nailing it in terms of do you think that my children think that I am a man hater? And I am not, but I sometimes think that we have to go the extreme, right? For the most part, men get a pass for so many things. Yeah. And right now we're just saying, we're done giving you a pass.
Yep.
Until you're willing to emotionally show up for me. And the other piece that I would say, and I have tried to instill this in my kids, is that, the other piece that I think is really destructive for marriages is when men don't know how to have support systems outside of their romantic relationship.
Yes.
Because they will suck you dry.
Yes.
If they do not have, I can't be your, but I cannot validate you enough to make you okay. You need other people doing that,
Yes. 100%.
It's very, very, but men are kind of conditioned to be I get that from you. And then I go out in the world and I am not vulnerable. How could I be vulnerable? I get all my vulnerability and my needs from you. And then I go out into the world and then I plug back in. And I've seen that in my relationship. It was too much. I was please go see your friends, have a relationship. I don't care who it is that's doing that for you. I, of course, will do my part, but I cannot fill you up all the way.
Exactly.
That's too much for one person. Mm. So one thing I'm really trying to teach my girls is that we have wide networks of support. And yes, how lovely if you find someone who feels like your person and you love them and you want to be with them all the time. And you should have supports outside of that relationship and they should also, because one romantic partnership does not make for the end all be all.
Yes.
Maybe for some people, but I really just don't think it's healthy.
I
really don't.
Yes, I agree. It's good to have activities outside of just your spouse.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. So I've heard some buzzwords that you use a lot in your writing or discussions with other experts or even followers of yours. And so I was going to throw a few out. And the first thing that comes to mind, I would love for you to either define it, in terms of what you wrote about it, or maybe just explain a little bit more of where that word came from. Because some of them I was what is that? So obviously I'll start off with an easy one. It's kind of a little game. I'll start off with an easy one because we talked about it a little bit before, but mommune. What is mommune?
Yes. Okay. So mommune is something that kind of came into there was a TikTok where someone who had gotten divorced and she was I never knew that all I needed was to get divorced and move into this place with other moms and they show up for me. I'm sick right now. They're taking care of my kids. They just brought a homemade soup to my door. I have never been taken care of the way these other moms take care of me. And so it then populated this term of a mommune, which is essentially just communal living with other moms. It's often divorcees who get divorced and then, again, cannot buy a house on their own because the financials don't work. And so they band together with a few other mothers who have children and they buy a place together and they decide to live their lives as a kind of family unit. They each tend to have their own like places that they live, but they come together and they do childcare and they do cooking, and they just kind of become a more communal place to live. And so, yes, one of my interviews was with Holly Harper. She did that, and she got a good bit of press about that. And they even have like a manifesto of like how it works, because it is, it's intentional living, and you have to be careful about who you commune with.
Right.
But I will say that like my friends, this friend group that I'm a part of, probably 3 of us of like 7 or 8 are divorced, but all of us kind of talk about, okay, when the kids are gone, where are we moving to go, like have our commune? But we don't have kids. We won't have kids anymore. But just that sense of, we maybe don't want to partner with men anymore, but we don't want to live on our own. We want to share resources. And so I think it's a little bit of a dream of like, once my kids are gone, like, am I going to go move in to a commune with a bunch of other moms so that we can have that kind of sense of community
support
and shared living that we've been looking for so long.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting one. Trapped. What comes to mind with trapped? Because I've said this before in my own marriage.
Yeah. I mean, we feel trapped because I think we feel trapped by the kids, honestly. I think if kids are not a part of the equation, it is much easier to leave a relationship. I think it is so hard as a mom to envision breaking apart that family unit for your kids.
100%. Yeah.
You have to like really, really feel like you're dying in order to do it. I don't think anyone does it lightly, so I think we get trapped because how do we do it to our kids? That's the first one. And then the other one is, especially if our careers have taken a back burner, how financially can I make it work living here on my own? Now, again, there are a lot of structures in divorce law to protect that, but you don't know what those are. And you can't trust that because you have to go to court to actually get that. And who knows how your judge is going to see it. Everything, the law is set up to protect you in some ways, but it's not guaranteed. And so it feels terrifying to leave without, those knowing what your financial reality is going to be. So you end up just feeling trapped. Like it's just better to stay in this pain I know than to risk pain I don't know until you just can't anymore.
Yeah. I think I even heard, it was either you or Gemma who had said like, is this good enough for me rather than is this bad enough to leave?
Yes, that's Gemma. I love that reframe.
I did too. And I was like, man, that's good. It's like you talk yourself into it. So yeah. All right. I got 2 more for you. One of them we've already touched on, so it kind of might be a little redundant, but COVID. What comes to mind when you think of COVID? For both of us, actually, but yeah.
I know. The point where everything in my life changed.
Yes.
It's like, what would have happened if it hadn't hit then? I think I'd still be married.
Yeah. Miserably.
Yeah, not happily. I think eventually we would split up, but it might have taken another 5 years.
Yeah.
Because I didn't realize how unhappy I was until COVID.
Yep.
And it brought everything to light. And I also have to say that I turned 40 the month before COVID hit. So I write a lot about how in our 40s, women all of a sudden hit this point of reinvention and they realize like what they've been doing isn't working for them and they completely reorient their lives. Reinvention, transformation, it's insane. For some women, it happens a little later than others. But for me, I also think, when COVID hit for me, my youngest was in kindergarten. So I felt like I'd finally gotten through those tough years of early motherhood when they don't even go to school, right? So I'd finally made it. And I do think for a lot of couples, there can be a moment of reconnection when you hit that point, right? Finally, the kids are older. You can go on date nights. There's just a different vibe and schedule, and it just feels more manageable. And that got taken away from us. So what would have happened? I'll never know, and I don't wish. I mean, obviously, I think there's a part of me for my kids that is like, gosh, maybe it would have been nicer if we could have at least gotten, through their high school years together as one family. But I also think it's priceless, them witnessing what I'm doing, which is, changing the terms, stepping into my own power, recognizing what I'm not willing to tolerate anymore. Like, those are lessons they're going to take with them. And they're pretty priceless.
Absolutely. Yeah, I echo all of that. I'm with you on the whole COVID boat, because that was the year when all three of our kids were going to be in one school, and we would have one schedule. And my baby was in kindergarten as well. And I'm like, this is so ridiculous that our kids are learning off of a screen. It was heartbreaking. And as for as shitty as the COVID year was, again, I think that was the awakening year. And, things are supposed to happen the way they're supposed to happen. So maybe that was like the reset for a ton of people. So ourselves included in that. So I don't know.
No, there's this term that I saw somewhere, and it's like COVID divorcee or a pandemic divorcee. And it's like who we are, those of us whose marriages imploded during the pandemic, for better or worse.
Yes.
Like, we're a whole category in itself.
Exactly. And I echo that. I do feel sad for my kids, because our middle is the one that's really struggling. Our bookends are kind of like, they don't love it, but they're more understanding of it. And our middle is the one that's really struggling. Like, I really wish things would go back to the way that they were. I wish we were in one house, and I wish you and daddy were together, and da, da, da. Now he's seeing someone, so they're seeing his relationship play out. And I'm not sure how she feels about it, but, at least there's, some positivity there, like they're seeing their dad happy and they're doing things together. And that's, like I said, a whole nother conversation. Like, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole, but
maybe someday. Maybe I have thoughts on that too.
Exactly.
I'll
come visit you.
I don't have a relationship, but he's certainly gotten into one right away. So that's a whole nother podcast.
Exactly.
And how do we deal with those feelings when you witness someone else being brought into their lives and all that, and you have no control over it? Exactly. But it also makes you go a little mama bear crazy, because you're like, who is this person? Exactly. And how is this? How do I have no say over this?
Yes.
But you don't.
Exactly. You don't. You just have to be like, okay, the only thing I care about, and this is what I told them, like, I'm never going to approve or disapprove of who your dad is seeing, but what I will disapprove or approve of is if she's loving you like her own. If she's good to you, then that's all I really care about. If she's taking care of you and she's kind to you, and that's really what it's about. So other than that, I don't know what to tell you. So
no.
Last one, and then a positive one, success. And you did actually, I'm like, you must have been in my head when we were talking about success a little bit ago, and how you want your daughters to define their relationship. So success, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, well, so you're probably picking up on it, because I did a whole post called The New Metrics of Success, because I just think, when you've failed at something, which many people see divorce as a failure, even though, as I write, it's one of the biggest successes of my life was calling time of death on something that was killing me. Mm-hmm. I'm just re-envisioning what that success, what is successful. And society tells us one thing, but that just keeps us on the hamster wheel of making more money, get a bigger house, get the next promotion, which means, does it actually feel like success to us? Like, so, I think for me right now, success is, am I growing? Am I interrogating who I am and my patterns? Am I evolving? Am I being brave? Am I connecting with the people I love? Am I being vulnerable? Am I taking moments to just like enjoy the juiciness of life, like cuddling with my cat, getting to bed at the end of the day and spread eagling because there's no one else there. Like, just like enjoy. There's so many moments of each day where we can enjoy the hell out of it, and we pass them by because we're like ticking things off a list to be successful.
Yeah.
I just don't want to live my life ticking things off a list, and then I didn't actually like put on a record and listen to my favorite song and feel like its vibe go through my body.
Yes.
These are the things, and we just pass them by chasing someone else's success. So I'm really trying to like slow down a little and like enjoy what is right here for me right now. Mm-hmm. It's not always easy because we always have all the voices in our head, but that would be success for me. I would see success at like, I do think I have a lot of growth to do in romantic relationships. Like, I don't think I showed up. I didn't show up in that relationship. That's why I didn't. I would like to show up and be present in a committed relationship at some point, and see what that feels like. And can I put down my walls and not relive the way I just did it last time,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
But we'll wait. We'll have to see when the universe brings someone worthy of that into my life. You know, you got to be patient.
Yes.
There's a lot of, it's tricky out there. So
well, you're doing the work now. That's what's important. Like this is the hard stuff, is like being honest with yourself and saying like, look, the mirror flipped a little bit. It's not just the other person. It's me too. And, you know, I had to do some of that as well, just from not dealing with, you know, my dad and sister's deaths, and carried that into my marriage. And I had walls. And he even said to me at one point, I don't even feel like I know who you are. And so I'm like, whew, that's hurtful. So yeah, I'm with you, Cindy. I totally get that. And I could sit here all day and talk to you, but I know I want to be respectful of your time. But I did just want to close with this quote that I love that you wrote. And then I want to flip the page and see if you have any final thoughts, because you had said, we can reinvent ourselves over and over and over again. Literally, I think that's what we're here to do, to evolve, shed skins that we've outgrown, and to move on to the next version of us. I just wanted to share that with our listeners because I loved that. So
yeah.
How about you? What final thoughts do you have for us?
Yeah. I mean, divorce is like the ultimate plot twist. It really is. And so as disruptive as it is, it also, I think, like, creates the opportunity for so much possibility. You know, I never could have guessed. Yeah. Like, you know, I don't know if you see those memes where it's like, February 2020 me talking to like February 2025 me or whatever. And like the look on their face. Cause like, yeah, what happened to me in the last 5 years is insane. Like nothing about my life looks the same.
Yeah.
And there's the downside of that, but there's also the beauty in that. It's hard to let go of things, and there's so much grief over the loss of a marriage and the family of 4. Oh, I hate that. And it's made space for so much more for me. So, you know, I think as long as we can, again, as long as we're doing the work to kind of like interrogate your own patterns. Listen, I was just as much a contributor to the end of that marriage as he was. Like that was my work, to be in that and get to the point where I could leave it. And now I'm in this different place. So yeah, I just think the world is full of possibility, and it's hard. Listen, there's like this crucible of calling it with a marriage, like being done. And it's so, so hard to give up on that dream. But once you've done it and just are willing to get through the hard, the other side can be so beautiful. I have no idea where my life is headed. And that once would have really scared me, but now it just invigorates me. It's like, who knows? And I love that question.
Yeah, I love it too. Well, thank you so much, Cindy, for joining me today. It's been great chatting.
Oh, I've loved it too. Thank you for having me.